After 4 weeks abroad, I was finally coming home. The trip had been long, part business, part much-needed vacation. But by the end, all I could think about was my ranch. The sweeping hills, the scent of pine and horses, and the kind of silence you only find when you're miles away from the nearest gas station. My plan had been to return on Sunday, but a canceled event in Lisbon bumped up my flight, and I figured, why not surprise everyone? As I turned off the main road and onto the gravel path leading to my property, I smiled. The early evening sun cast golden rays across the fields, and everything looked just as I'd left it. Until it didn't. The closer I got to the front gate, the more confused I became. There were cars, lots of them. Not just one or two trucks like the ranch hands drive. There were shiny sedans, a few Teslas, even a food truck with a sign that read, "Rustic Bites, Fresh Eats, Country Style." Balloons floated near the entrance. A wooden sign was propped up at the front fence, decorated in gaudy colors and glittering letters that spelled out, "Live Property Auction, 1 day only." I slowed the truck, blinked, and then read the sign again. Property auction? This had to be some kind of mistake. I hadn't authorized anything like that. No one had even asked me. My name was on every legal paper tied to this land. I owned this place outright. My grandfather built the barn with his own hands, and I had the deed locked in a fireproof safe. I pulled through the gate, my tires crunching over the gravel as I approached the house. The crowd grew larger the closer I got. People in dress shirts and wide-brimmed hats were strolling around like they were at a state fair, peering into the barn, inspecting the stables, and even pointing at my vintage tractor like it was some kind of prize exhibit. A few teenagers were lounging near the fence, drinking lemonade from plastic cups handed out by a woman wearing a bright orange vest labeled HOA Volunteer. What in the hell was going on? I parked near the front porch, climbed out of my truck, and walked straight into the crowd. No one even noticed me at first. I overheard someone ask, "How much do you think the main house will go for?" Another person replied, "Karen said the owner abandoned it, said it's part of the community trust now." Karen. The name hit me like a cold slap. Karen Stanton, head of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, president of the community council, and unofficial busybody of the entire region. She'd been trying to insert herself into ranch business for over a year now, always dropping hints about how my unkempt fences brought down property values for the nearby developments. I'd ignored her, thinking it was just suburban. Nonsense, I didn't even live in Whispering Pines. My land sat outside their zoning district, protected by county records. And yet, here I was, standing in the middle of some HOA-hosted circus on my land. I scanned the crowd and saw her. Blonde, bob bouncing as she gestured dramatically with a clipboard in one hand and a megaphone in the other. She was standing on the back of my flatbed trailer, addressing a group of people gathered around like she was hosting a TED Talk. "Now remember," she was saying, "bids start at $50,000 for the east pasture. We're keeping this fair and legal, community first always." Fair and legal? My jaw clenched as I pushed my way forward, ready to put an end to whatever delusional nightmare I'd just walked into. I had come home early expecting peace, quiet, and my own bed. Instead, I found myself at the center of a fraudulent land auction orchestrated by a suburban dictator with a god complex, and I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase yet. I didn't wait. I marched straight through the crowd, shoving past a man who was scribbling notes on a clipboard while eyeing my horse stables like he planned to tear them down and put in a yoga studio. The closer I got to Karen, the louder her voice blared through the megaphone. She was announcing parcels of my land like a carnival barker. "And this next lot includes the barn, 2 tractors, and the guest cottage. Perfect for an Airbnb conversion." I stepped up onto the trailer behind her and grabbed the megaphone right out of her hand. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my property?" I snapped, my voice booming even without amplification. Karen turned slowly, her fake smile faltering just enough to show she wasn't expecting me. "You weren't supposed to be back until next week," she said, like that somehow excused what she was doing. "I wasn't supposed to be back?" I repeated, stunned. "So you planned this behind my back while I was gone?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tried to reclaim control. This property has been reported multiple times for abandonment and neglect. As president of the Homeowners Association, I was well within my rights to take action. I stared at her in disbelief. You're not even my HOA. This ranch isn't part of Whispering Pines or any neighborhood. It's private land, Karen. Mine. You don't have any rights here. Oh, we'll see about that, she said, waving a manila folder filled with paperwork in my face like it was a legal weapon. We served 3 notices of code violations: unpainted fencing, overgrown grass, and visible debris near the north gate. Under Section 5B of the Community Preservation Act, I was authorized to secure and redistribute abandoned property. I actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. First off, that debris was firewood. Second, the Community Preservation Act doesn't even apply here. And third, I didn't abandon anything. I've been gone less than a month, and my ranch manager checks in twice a day. You think you can just throw a party and auction off someone's livelihood because the paint on a fence is chipped? By now, some of the crowd was starting to murmur. A few people slowly lowered their phones. One older couple edged away from the barn and got into their car, realizing this wasn't the charming countryside steal they thought it was. Karen, though, stood firm. This is bigger than you, she said, lips tight. The community has concerns. Your ranch is a visual nuisance. It reduces the value of our properties. We can't have people driving past this on their way to Whispering Pines. It's disruptive. And you thought the solution was to steal it? I didn't steal anything, she snapped. I followed procedure. You can dispute it with the board. What board? I asked. There is no board over my land, Karen. I jumped down from the trailer and yanked the sign off my fence. Splinters tore into my palm, but I didn't care. I was boiling. Get off my property, I shouted. All of you, this auction is canceled. Karen, if you don't leave, I'm calling the sheriff. Oh no, you won't, she said smugly, pulling out her phone. You're making a scene. You're acting hostile. You're trespassing. I already called 911. Trespassing? I repeated, blinking. On my own ranch? She didn't flinch. She dialed and held her phone up as if she were about to narrate the next great drama of her life. Yes, 911? I'm being threatened by an aggressive male trespasser. He's shouting and damaging property. Please send someone quickly. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But as I stood there watching her lie through her teeth, I realized exactly how far she was willing to go. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was dangerous. And she was trying to erase me from my own land. I looked out at the crowd, at the people still holding up auction paddles and shaking their heads, and I made a silent vow. Karen picked the wrong rancher to mess with. The sirens wailed in the distance before I even had time to blink. It hadn't even been 5 minutes since Karen made that bogus 911 call, and already 2 sheriff's vehicles were tearing down my gravel road like they were responding to an armed robbery. I stood my ground, still holding the splintered auction sign in one hand and the megaphone in the other. My heart pounded, but not out of fear. Pure righteous fury was pumping through my veins. Karen straightened her posture like she'd just won a pageant, smoothing her blouse and putting on a tearful expression like she'd been rehearsing it all week. There he is, she cried dramatically as the deputies got out of their trucks. That's the man who threatened me. He's unstable. He claimed this property as his, even though it's under HOA action. The lead deputy, a guy named Wallace I'd known for years, approached cautiously, one hand on his belt. He squinted at me. Rick, that you? Yep, I replied flatly. Didn't expect to be greeted with flashing lights when I came home. Karen rushed up beside him, pointing at me like she was naming a criminal on a most wanted poster. He showed up screaming, threatening people, vandalizing our signage. This is a peaceful, legal auction. We've had complaints about this ranch for months. Wallace turned to me. You mind explaining what's going on here? I took a deep breath and handed him the megaphone. Yeah, I'll explain. I've been out of the country for the last month. I got home today and found this woman. I motioned to Karen, who was still pretending to be clutching invisible pearls, holding an unauthorized auction on my land. My name is on the deed. This property has never been abandoned, and I've never agreed to any sort of HOA jurisdiction. She's trespassing, and so is everyone else here. Wallace frowned and pulled out his notebook. You got proof of ownership? In the safe inside the house, I said. But I can also email you a scanned copy right now. It's on my cloud. Karen stepped in again, this time trying a more legal tone. Deputy, I have documentation showing that we served this property with multiple citations for non-compliance. Under community ordinance, after a 30-day window of no response, the HOA is allowed to take temporary stewardship for the sake of the neighborhood. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Temporary stewardship? You mean hijacking? Wallace looked increasingly uncomfortable. Karen, this isn't an HOA neighborhood, you know that, right? Rick's land was never zoned into Whispering Pines. His granddad had this place before the subdivision even broke ground. She faltered. But the Community Preservation Act doesn't apply here, I said, cutting her off. My property's on unincorporated county land. You've got no jurisdiction. And if you've been walking around telling people otherwise and collecting money or bids, well, that's fraud. Now some of the spectators were looking nervous. A few were quietly leaving, clearly aware they'd wandered into something illegal. Wallace looked at the other deputy and nodded toward the auction setup. Start clearing folks out, this event's over. Karen's face turned a shade of red that bordered on crimson. You can't just shut this down, this is sanctioned. This is for the community. No, Wallace said firmly. This is someone else's private property and you've been misrepresenting your authority. That's a serious accusation. We're going to need to review all the documents you used to organize this. I was only trying to help, Karen sputtered, but the facade was cracking. I suggest you stay right here, Wallace said. Don't make this worse. As the deputies began ushering people out and taping off parts of the property, I stood by my porch with my fists clenched, trying to process everything. Karen had really tried to erase me, sell off my land, rewrite reality. She looked at me one last time as if still expecting me to back down. But I didn't move. I just met her gaze, dead on. She didn't know it yet, but her little power trip was about to come crashing down, and I was going to be the one holding the receipts. The dust hadn't even settled from the sheriff clearing out the crowd when I went inside to grab the paperwork. My hands were still shaking, not from fear but from rage barely held in check. My safe was right where I left it, hidden behind an old tool rack in the office, untouched. I entered the code, opened the door, and pulled out the manila envelope. With everything. Title deed, tax records, historical land boundaries, you name it. Within minutes, I had scanned copies sent off to Wallace's department email, just in case Karen tried to pull more stunts. When I stepped back outside, Karen was still there, arguing with one of the deputies now, trying to spin a new version of events. I didn't technically forge anything, she said, waving her HOA binder. I just filled in missing signatures for compliance. It's common practice. The community trusts me. Wallace raised an eyebrow. You're saying you signed documents on behalf of other people without their knowledge? Karen blinked. Well, yes, but only the inactive members. They wouldn't mind. They're never at the meetings. She said it with so much confidence that I almost believed she truly didn't see how bad it was. Wallace didn't look impressed. That's not how authorization works. That's misrepresentation at best, criminal fraud at worst. Karen folded her arms tightly, lips thinning. You're making this personal, deputy. I was trying to do what's best for everyone. This ranch is an eyesore. Rick's been gone for weeks and the weeds near the road were a safety hazard. I took out my phone and opened my photo album. Funny, this is a time-stamped photo from 4 days ago taken by my ranch manager. The place is spotless, fences, upgrass mowed, animals well fed. I turned the screen toward Wallace. He nodded, then said something into his radio. Karen's expression shifted from arrogant to uncertain. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my land. She'd done this before. Maybe not an auction, maybe not this bold, but she'd been using her position to bend rules, twist words, and inflate her power beyond the law. She picked her targets carefully. People who didn't show up to HOA meetings, elderly residents, absentee owners. I suddenly remembered hearing that an older couple down the road had sold their house unexpectedly after some HOA dispute. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. I opened the camera app and started recording. "Go ahead, Karen," I said. "Explain to the camera how you faked documents, held an illegal auction, and tried to sell a ranch you don't own." She stepped back, shielding her face. "You can't record me without my consent." "Yes, I can. We're in a one-party consent state, and you're on my private property. Keep talking." Karen turned toward Wallace. "Are you just going to let him harass me like this?" Wallace didn't flinch. "Karen, you need to sit down. We're contacting the county attorney. You're going to have to answer for what you've done." That's when things started blowing up online. Unbeknownst to Karen, a few people in the crowd had already posted clips of her calling 911 on the actual owner of the property. One of those clips had gone viral. Over 20,000 views in an hour. Comment sections were on fire. Someone even tagged a local news station. People were digging up her name, her HOA antics. Stories of neighbors being fined for ridiculous things like having a garden gnome or parking too close to their own garage. My inbox began filling with messages. Support from neighbors I hadn't spoken to in months, offers from legal experts volunteering to help, and a lawyer from Austin who offered to represent me pro bono because HOA tyrants need to be taken down. Karen saw me smiling at my phone and narrowed her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Oh, I think it is," I replied. "And you're going to be real familiar with courtrooms when I'm done." She didn't respond, just stood there, for once completely speechless. It was the first time all day I actually felt like things were starting to turn around. Karen didn't come quietly. Even after the sheriff's deputies had escorted her off the property, she was still yelling over her shoulder, trying to rally support from the few hangers-on who hadn't already fled the scene. "You're all going to regret this," she shouted. "He's manipulating the narrative. This is all lies." But nobody was listening anymore. By the next morning, the video of her calling 911 on me, while I stood on my own front porch, had over 200,000 views. It had made its way onto several HOA horror story forums and even caught the attention of a regional news outlet. Their crew showed up at sunrise, cameras rolling as they interviewed my ranch manager, the neighbors who came by to offer support, and even Wallace, who gave a carefully worded statement that made it clear Karen was in very hot water. I sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching it all unfold. The same porch that, less than 24 hours ago, Karen had tried to put on the auction block. It was surreal. In the span of one day, I'd gone from peaceful solitude to being at the center of a viral legal storm, but I wasn't about to sit back and enjoy the attention. I spent the next few hours on the phone, first with the county clerk's office, then with my lawyer. Yes, I took that Austin attorney up on his offer. He'd dealt with rogue HOAs before and knew exactly how to press charges for fraud, defamation, and attempted property theft. Together, we began compiling a case. Every forged notice Karen had mailed, every false claim of jurisdiction, every misused HOA fund tied to her little auction event. Then came the bombshell. My lawyer called me that afternoon after pulling Karen's public records. "Rick," he said, "you're not going to believe this. She tried to transfer a temporary deed using a fabricated community trust. There's no legal entity behind it, it's all smoke. The document's fake. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was premeditated. That was all I needed to hear." Within 48 hours, a lawsuit was filed. Not only was Karen facing criminal charges for fraud and impersonation, but we hit her with a civil suit that made sure she'd be feeling this for years. Misuse of HOA power, slander, mental anguish, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. My lawyer told me it might take a while in court, but the outcome was already tilting in my favor. The evidence was overwhelming. The fallout came fast. The HOA Board of Whispering Pines called an emergency meeting the following week. Karen didn't show. Instead, she submitted a statement full of half-hearted excuses and veiled accusations, trying to paint herself as a victim of online harassment. But no one was buying it. Half the board members resigned on the spot. The rest voted unanimously to remove her as president and bar her from holding any leadership position again. Local media dubbed it the ranch auction scandal, and it dominated headlines for days. Reporters camped outside the HOA office. Former neighbors came forward with their own stories, fines for cracked flower pots, threats over curtain colors, and one woman who claimed Karen tried to have her patio furniture removed for being a shade of blue inconsistent with community harmony. But here's the best part. The community that Karen claimed she was protecting? They rallied around me. Folks I hadn't talked to in years drove out just to drop off fresh eggs, pies, and handshakes. One guy even offered to repaint my fence for free, just because he liked seeing a real Texan put a tyrant in her place. And Karen? She went silent. Her social media vanished. Her house went up for sale within a month. Rumor was she'd moved in with a relative across the state to avoid the drama. As for me, the ranch is quieter now, peaceful. But every time I walk past the spot where she held that fake auction, I smile, because she tried to take everything from me. And instead, she lost everything she built on lies.